Good evening, and welcome to the December 2nd, 2020 regular meeting of the Windham Southeast School District Board. I call us to order at 6:03 p.m. We have a quorum and the meeting has been properly warned. I want to make a couple of agenda changes. Under old business, I would like to add to put back in, we didn't put in continuing to talk about the town meeting because elections are a part of that, and articles, admitting some more people. The elections are part of that. 4 of us are up for re-election, or if we choose not to run again, 4 seats will be open. And also the upcoming vote. And I wanted to check and see, we won't be talking about this at all at any length tonight, but I wanted to check in with board members and have people think about it and talk about whether we wanted to consider an article, given that this is the time to consider them if we want to get anything on the ballot, an article that would dissolve the unified board and replace the local boards. This isn't something that I'm hearing a lot of public outcry for. It's happening in other regions, but now would be the time for us to have a look at that and see if we wanted to consider that. So we'll talk very briefly about it and about the process under old business, and then we'll have it on the agenda next week if people want to consider it. The second thing is I would like to move the Finance Committee report up to immediately follow the fiscal report. A lot of what the Finance Committee has been dealing with in the last their last 2 meetings are budget related things, and there are things that need to be shared in detail with the full board. So I wanted to talk about, I wanted to be able to talk with Frank about that and not have him have to wait until we get to the committee reports. So unless there are any objections or comments or responses, I will move right on to the consent agenda. We have a clerk's report, approval of the minutes of November 18th, 2020, and warrants of August 31st, November 2nd, November 9th, November 16th, November 20th, and payrolls for August 28th, November 9th, and November 20th of 2020. Can I have a motion, please, to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Tim. Second?
Second, Emily.
Thank you, Emily. Moved by Tim and seconded by Emily to accept the consent agenda. Any discussion?
Yeah, David, there were a number of people who aren't included in the minutes who were actually at the last meeting. Like I know Ruby was there, I know Tara was there, and they're not included in the minutes.
I think
I don't know what happened.
they may have come in late. I don't know.
Okay.
Wendy is here. Wendy, do you have any comments on that, or should Liz send you a list of people that aren't there?
Yeah, David, thank you. It's been a real challenge taking attendance with Zoom. Thomas and I have been working on it together. He offered to take attendance for me, but similarly, you know, it's really hard to just take attendance through the whole meeting. So we do the best we can. So any help we can get, I'll speak for Thomas and speak for myself, would be greatly appreciated. So thank you.
Great. So let me just make, so we have a practice here. I think if people see, as you review the minutes before the meeting, if you see changes or recommend changes, I would ask that you send them to me and to Wendy so we know ahead of time, and then we can actually make the changes and approve them at the meeting. Fortunately, we haven't had a lot, but Zoom does create a whole bunch of new problems.
David,
So I think we'll try that and see if it's helpful.
David,
Thank you, Liz and Wendy. Thanks.
David, one thing.
Yes, go ahead, Emily.
I don't know if you can hear me okay, but
Yes.
so just to let you know that when whoever's the administrator of our Zoom account can actually, it has meeting attendance right through it. So you could actually just grab it from that meeting in the reports and send it off to Wendy. I don't know who's the administrator though.
Well, I think it's the I think it's our tech coordinator. I would ask Andy to please look into that and see if you could facilitate that process. It'd be really nice if they could just go directly to Barb and Wendy wouldn't even have to worry about it. If it's just a transferring a file, that would be great. So Andy, would you see if you can expedite that, or if it's possible? So any other comments? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none, the consent agenda is approved. So we are on to communications. We had a communication 2 weeks ago now from a coalition of school boards, people from, let me get my list here, from Rutland, from Winooski, from, I think it's Rutland Northeast, Twin Valley, and Otter Valley, and Rutland Northeast Supervisor Union, and Windham Northeast, who were looking to encourage the legislature to implement the changes, the recommendations in the pupil weighting study that was done by researchers at UVM and a few others, and presented to the legislature. And it was part of Act 173. And the goal of 173 was obviously to improve equity for everyone and to enhance the delivery of special education. And by changing to the population model instead and a block grant rather than the number of, or the percentage of students that are receiving special ed services, there were some districts that are going to be damaged. And because the study found that the way that students are weighted, particularly English language learners and special needs students, there were already some inequities in the process. It wasn't a system that was based on anything. And there's a lot of information about that, and people are welcome to follow up on that. And I noticed that on November 4th, Frank talked about that with the talked about the legislative initiative addressing equalized pupils, and oh no, that was something different, sorry. But that's something that we have talked about in the past, and I'd like to just ask Frank to tell us a little bit about that weighting study and about the actually, I'm not sure if he's here yet. Yes, he is. Yeah, great. Tell us a little bit about that, or answer any questions that people have about that study. I think you're pretty familiar with it.
Yeah, I could make a couple of comments, David.
Great, thank you.
There's an executive summary that I have. I did find it was a draft document, and I do believe the full document is on the AOE website. But in the executive summary draft that I reviewed, the current existing weight for poverty is a factor of 0.25. And the study is recommending a weighting of 3.14. So you can see the order of magnitude that would change the way in which equalized pupil is calculated. So, you know, it would really have a substantial impact on our tax rates and our ability to continue to fund the intervention programs that we have now. And then, as you mentioned, David, the current Act 173 census-based block grant, it ignores poverty, and it ignores the weighting or the investment that's required for communities that have a larger proportion of students in poverty or identified as special education students. So on two fronts, you know, one, I would hope this resolution joining Burlington and others emphasizes how important it is to recognize that communities like ours need that weighting study integrated into the funding policy with the state of Vermont, and we really need the recommendation around the special ed census block grant to incorporate poverty, or at least be weighted for the proportion of kids that are eligible for an IEP in a community. Because if this goes forward the way it is right now in front of the State Board of Ed, there was a hearing I couldn't make a couple of weeks ago on the this segment of school funding. If it goes forward the way it's written, it totally ignores the need, and it will accelerate the mismatch between the resources for communities like ours versus communities in around Burlington, in terms of South Burlington and Champlain Valley and those sort of systems that in some instances they have 2% of their students are in identified as needing an individual education plan, where we have somewhere around 16%. So under the block grant, the way it's written now, we'd all get the same number same dollar per student, and that makes no sense at all.
I don't think that makes it's pretty clear description. As is often the case with legislation and studies, there are districts like ours which would benefit from the change, and there are districts, if nothing else changed, if we were working from the same education fund, there are districts that would have to lose, and that makes it much more difficult and much more political process. And I think the having school boards involved in the process of developing the legislation that's going to come to this is really important, and that's why this coalition was formed. And I think so. I'm encouraging. I'll read the resolution in a minute, and I'll actually move it myself. But I just wanted to make the point that it will be controversial and it will be difficult, because there are districts that, under just the results of the study, would lose. There would need to be other adjustments, hold harmless adjustments, or some other methods of making sure that there aren't winners and losers. But the ultimate goal of the act and of the study is equity, and none of us are allowed to work around that or to oppose that, particularly on for fiscal reasons. So it's going to be a big lift for the legislature at a time when, for 1 year, they aren't going to have accurate information, and next year they're going to be looking at 2 years of revenue shortfalls because of the pandemic. So it's not going to be an easy thing, and it's really important that school boards be deeply involved in the process. So I would like us to join these other districts, and there's a meeting, I think, in 2 weeks to a follow-up meeting with additional members than the 7 or 8 districts that were there in the last meeting. And so I would like to move that the board approve the following resolution. Be it resolved, the Windham Southeast Supervisory District hereby joins with other Vermont school boards to advocate to the Vermont legislature for the adoption of the recommendations of the Vermont Pupil Weighting Factors Report of Act 173 of 2018.
Second.
Thank you, Liz. Is there any discussion? This is something that I think will come up many times, and we'll be talking about it, I'm sure, as the year goes on. Any questions or discussion from the board?
Just a clarification, David.
Yes.
Oops, I should have raised my hand. Let me pull that up.
I haven't seen any hands yet.
Sorry, Kelly. I don't know if you were first, but I'll just ask so when we're talking about this resolution, it's just the pupil weights, the increase in pupil weights, not the block grant.
It doesn't address the block grant issue.
Okay.
As far as I know at this point. Yeah, it's just the weighting study.
Okay.
I won't editorialize that on that. I just think the legislature took a long time to come up with that, and there are a lot of good components to it. So I think that has to be worked around. Kelly?
I just want to say the comparison of the 2% to the approximately 16% is startling. And I would say that if the numbers were somewhat closer, you could say, well, it you might feel a little bad that somebody else is losing out. Although I don't really see it in terms of losing. I see this more in terms of equity. So I think if they had a number, I see it in terms of equity. And again, if the numbers were closer, you might feel a little bit bad, but considering that there seems to be, I think, a startling difference between 2% and 16%, I see it as a no-brainer to support it.
Thanks, Kelly. Any other comments before we vote? Okay, hearing none. The motion is to support the resolution saying, be it resolved, the WSESD hereby joins with other Vermont school boards to advocate to the Vermont legislature for the adoption of recommendations of the Vermont Pupil Weighting Factors Report. And I should say this doesn't in any way commit us, but there probably will be costs associated with this, and whether it will be fundraising or whether boards will be asked to contribute. None of that has been developed. It's an unformed coalition. But I just, I don't want people to be surprised if I come back and say, well, they need $1 a student or something, to hire a lobbying firm or something like that. So, but that's not in this resolution. That would be different, and it would come in a different form. So hearing no further comments, all those in favor, please unmute and indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the resolution passes. Thank you. Next is administrative reports.
So I don't have a lot this evening. We do have a position we'd like to put up for approval. Steve, do you want to share Catherine's position?
Certainly. I am pleased to recommend that Ms. Catherine Domarecki be hired as our Latin teacher for the balance of the school year, beginning on this Friday. She will replace Elizabeth Leibach, who passed away earlier this fall. She will be a remote teacher, and she'll be conducting her classes remotely. She does live in northern Vermont. She will be with us for the balance of the 2020-21 school year. And we had 3 people apply for the position. We interviewed 2 of them. And Catherine clearly rose to the top with her experience, both as an online teacher and also as a Latin teacher. So my recommendation is that we would hire Ms. Catherine Domarecki as our Latin teacher for the balance of this school year.
It's astonishing you could find somebody with all those qualifications on such short notice.
Yeah. We
Remote, maybe. Yeah.
We reached out to a lot of foreign language consortiums to find Catherine.
Thank you. Who could, again, would you say her name and spell it for Wendy, unless you already sent it to her?
Sure, Catherine, and that's Catherine with a C. Domarecki, D-O-M-A-R-E-K-I.
I would ask for a motion to approve the employment of Catherine Domarecki. I guess not, Steve. Nobody wants to make a motion.
So moved.
Thanks, Michelle. Can I have a second?
Second, Emily.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. The new employee, any questions, comments? Hearing none, please unmute. All those in favor of the appointment, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, it's approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Steve. So in other news, WSESU participated in surveillance testing. We participated after the last board meeting. Just wanted to give you the update that things went well. In no small part to the efforts of our school nurses, our COVID coordinator, Arlene Scott, and BUHS assistant principal, Chris Day. We had no positive results from that, and we had approximately 45% of our staff participate within that. So one of the questions that that's come up is, about what have we done with schools. We did remain open for in-person learning coming back from the holiday break. Attendance was a little lower than what it's typically been, but it was well within what we would consider a range of a kind of a standard deviation of what we would think on a regular day. But staff coverage has been tight, and we've had some challenges with staffing on some of the days. So our leadership team has been working on what the second semester models will be looking like. We would expect that the transition to 4 days per week at the elementary school will have some information going out to families towards the end of the week, with a timeline around making a commitment for that time period. Both middle school and high school are working on their models as well. And we're currently working on a way to evaluate our remote readiness. And so we've talked as a leadership group about what is our kind of what we'd call pivot ready, and that's language that's come from the AOE around our remote readiness. And so how quickly can we transition to remote learning if necessary? So in terms of our learning from remote, and we'll probably have a more comprehensive report and analysis of this in the springtime, in terms of what are we doing for new learning with regards to remote learning. And so on a site-by-site basis, we do have small teacher groups forming to share new practices. We have created optional professional learning time. Our teacher website, which has been one of those websites that's created through the Google Site feature, will be updated to really create as a warehouse and repository for information. And Deb Cardane and Paul and Gary Parsik are going to start working on that items. In terms of social emotional learning, we have a pilot program with Panorama, which is an interface to survey students on the use of social emotional learning surveys to really gauge where students are, and it's proving to be a tool with a lot of opportunity in it. There was one other question regarding staff retention and recruitment. You can say that admin participated in a Great Schools Partnership webinar with Michaela today to also share a little bit of that. The first meeting with our teacher group, Human Resources and Leadership, is scheduled for the 17th of December. That's of this month. And that the purpose of that group will look at our hiring practices and processes to identify what are some sort of standing protocols that we would put in place with all new hires, especially with our teacher population, to make sure that we're recruiting more diverse staff. HR is also registered with Handshake, which is a newer app that has been really prevalent on colleges in terms of hooking up candidates with potential with job suitors, and to find a way to kind of expand that reach into a broader college field. She's also signed up with Indeed, and she's participated in, there are some Vermont College virtual career fairs. And we've asked Michaela to develop a list of colleges and universities that we would want to also target to provide information to. So I would turn it over to Michaela unless there are any questions around the first part of that. Michaela did participate in the Great Schools Partnership webinar as one of the speakers, and she's participating on a statewide task force around how can Vermont work to diversify its workforce, its teacher workforce. So I'd ask Michaela to share some of her experiences with that as well. Great,
thanks, Andy. Michaela, we're going to have you back in a couple meetings to get another update on the commitment and hear from the teacher leaders. So you don't have to do that this time. You can just focus on the statewide retention or recruitment work.
Okay, good evening. And can I screen share at all?
You can as soon as I push the right button.
Okay, push the magic buttons.
It's pushed.
Good evening, everyone. I hope everyone's well. Just so you know, the webinars were based on the New England Secondary School Consortium report on diversifying the educator workforce. It's quite a meaty report, and the webinars are basically to help people kind of acclimate them to the report instead of having everyone having to read it, and also to interact and meet people from across the state. So I joined that Vermont Diversifying Education Task Force a little bit before that meeting, and looked at the report, and it really works tandemly with a lot of our efforts here in the school district. We have been looking at this for a couple years, really starting with having dinners and having activities for our own workers from diverse backgrounds. And in this case, we are focusing on race, which was what the board was focused on at the time. And so for the past 2 years, we've had at least one dinner a year. And now there's a monthly meeting for that is open to all educators of color. So just a meeting place and a sounding board for people with those diverse experiences. So just so you know that that's happening as well. In terms of, and now y'all get to see all my tabs. Sometimes I have tab shame.
Michaela, not as bad as mine.
I'll just wait and see. So here are the grounding principles, just to give you an idea. And the commitment to equity, acknowledging the harm that the system has perpetuated, honoring identity, engaging equitably. I think that was my principle. And I spoke with a young person, Mia, from Northern Vermont. Being an anti-racist, and measure and share and reflect on data and evidence in a transparent manner. Cece, I can't even see my next tab. So these are the principles, and that was the first focus. And there's one other slide about, and this is something that all of you know very well, but it's interesting to really look at. And that's that looking at how diverse our students are and compared to the rest of the population. And this is in the state of Vermont. So just looking at how quickly, in terms of racial diversity, how quickly young people are changing as not opposed to, but in relation to the rest of the community. And as you know, we're an aging population. And so this is one of many ideas that I have about how to diversify the workforce. And one is by us participating. And so many of our administrators were in the meeting at Andy's request. And I'll just repeat that also the first ad hoc meeting with Stacy Musso will be on December 17th. And there are other efforts that we really have connecting and keeping relationships going is really important to maintaining and encouraging a diverse workforce, and also just the continued opportunities, so that people are learning in their field and progressing. I don't know if anyone has any questions or comments.
All right, any questions from the board or the public? I'm not seeing any flags. Great, thank you. I think people are ready for a short meeting. Thanks, Michaela.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Is there anything else on your report?
No, that would be it for the night. I did ask, Frank and I connected a little bit about, you wanted to hear about some of the HVAC projects that we're going to have some content to share.
Yeah,
about.
I didn't know, I hadn't, the first time, I can't remember where, but recently, I guess it was an announcement that one of the schools announced which days everybody would be remote because of that work needing to be done. And then there was another one and then another one. So I didn't realize it was across the district. I thought it was just Dummerston really that was getting work done. So yeah, I would like just kind of a comprehensive update of the schools and the effect and what's going to happen.
Sure, I can speak to that. So as you know, the program ends December 31st. So the countdown is on, and there's a lot of folks working really hard to make every hour count, which means, getting work done, every day of the week of December. And related to that, the three major projects out of the 600,000 that I reported on last meeting that we've applied for in funding, about 188,000 at Academy for unit ventilators. So I think 11 unit ventilators are scheduled for December 14. And so that's what you may have heard of in terms of a remote window for those students and staff. Fortunately, we are able to continue to operate the food service program out of Academy during that work. So that's important. The second largest project was the Guilford project, and actually that went very well. That was completed just now, I guess it's a couple of weeks ago. And I've gotten very good feedback about that. That was about $170,000. It was also 11 unit ventilators out of 18 in the building. Those units are doing what we expected, which is bringing a lot more outside air, and then the air changes per hour are all within the ASHRAE guidance. The third kind of largest project is the Brattleboro Union testing and balancing. The testing segment has been completed, and now it's balancing, and that's it's a very sophisticated system, much more modern technology at the high school versus our elementary buildings, which were built in or retrofitted long before the 2003 project that brought in that new technology. Initially, we thought there might be some interruption in instruction, but I think between Steve and his team and Robert Clark and then the vendors, they've managed to work a schedule where essentially they're working around each other, and that work is progressing. We are concerned about whether or not they will get that work done. There's a very large number of units, so doing the best we can. The whole state is pushing vendors right now, and that's the issue. Is that the state wasn't able to really commit the funding for us until just recently. We're just recently getting grant agreements and so on. So it's really unfortunately compressed the timeline. But a lot of folks are doing a really good job maximizing the benefit. The balance, so that's what I just described is over $400,000 in projects that are well underway, or in the Guilford case complete. The remaining projects are at a smaller scale, and I would say we're about halfway through those projects. So those would be things like ventilation fans on the roof that need to be tied into the server that controls the air intake and exhaust. Similarly, in Putney, we have work on exhaust fans and calibration. Vernon has been completed. And let's see, anyone idea? Oak Grove, they've actually completed the work that was scheduled. A fair amount of duct cleaning and a few exhaust fans. So there's an overview of where we're at. I think the only area that's still to come that has an implication around remote learning is the Academy project. So Kelly's worked with Robert Clark and the contractor to do the best they can to complete that without any other interruptions.
Great, that's an amazing amount of work. And whether we have another virus to deal with or not, it's going to make a much healthier environment for all of our students. So that's really, and our staff as well. So that's great. That work's all getting done and updated. Any questions from anyone on the effects of the ventilation work on what happens in the buildings?
And David, if I could just take a moment to really commend Robert Clark for extending himself, and working with Steve Perrin at the high school. It really is outside of his core responsibility, but he's so expert at energy efficiency projects, working with contractors, setting good standards, knowing what complete work looks like versus good enough kind of thing, really insisting on a top quality result. He's been in all of our elementary buildings, personally right in there crawling around in attics and in HVAC systems to make sure that this work gets done. And he's pushed folks, the contractors, really hard, probably more so than they're accustomed to, and he's getting great results. So just want to be sure to commend him, and all of our facility personnel are really stepped up. Lots of kudos to those folks for what they've done.
Thank you. I hope Wendy got some of that in the minutes, because that's the kind of thing that I think the Communications Council might want to take up to find some more information, get a little, maybe get an interview, or get somebody like Nancy Olson, who used to do profiles on people for the Reformer, to get some information and get that around, and also the contractors, to commend them for their work as well. It can't hurt to let people know we think they did good work. So we'll see if we can I see Michelle's nodding her head. So I think we're okay. Great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Anything else administratively?
No, not this time.
Okay. And Frank, budget planning update?
Sure. If I could just sort of combine this with our Finance Committee discussion.
That'd be perfect. Yep. Perfect.
Okay. Excellent. So I'll give you a kind of a little bit of a briefer overview of what we discussed at Finance, and it was basically two topics. One is the announcement from the tax commissioner that I don't know if the board has seen it yet, but I'm sure you will. I'm sure you'll get a distribution of the Vermont State Tax Commissioner's forecast on the what they call the yield, education yield. It's one of four critical variables in setting school property tax rates. So we reviewed the commissioner's forecast and talked a little bit about the implications for our own budget planning. Sort of the bottom line on the forecast is it's not what we had hoped for, meaning we had certain general statements from the legislature, in the summer, that they were going to put a floor under the average daily membership count, and I've referred to that before. So there's no indication that's not there, but what was not really alluded to is that there would be a significant negative effect on this yield number. But the tax commissioner's forecast does predict a 9-cent tax rate increase on average across the state if we had the same number of kids and the same spending level as we do now. They're saying because of a loss of revenues to go into the education fund and other economic conditions that he's forecasted, that's the impact on average. So every school is different depending on what a school board proposed budget is divided by the number of kids. So we're going to work through that process. We have been, but this is news as of this morning. So I've had a brief conversation with Andy about the implications of this, and we've shared that with our administrative team. And then just kind of wrap up that portion of our discussion. Members of the Finance Committee made sure that we also emphasize that it's only a forecast, and there's an expectation that at the federal level, there will be another relief act. You know, it's currently actually, you see that in the headlines now. It looks like there's a bipartisan attempt to actually move forward. The tax commissioner also alludes to that. So it's disappointing to see, you know, that's the sort of the starting point that we have, but I suppose we shouldn't be too surprised that that's where we're at. And, you know, we'll work through that as we finalize the draft budget assumptions.
Is it fair to say, Frank, that, or we have that number now, and we have the I don't know if we got a firm number for the health increase. I think
We did. We did. It was about 10%.
About
Yeah,
10, yeah.
About 10%. Yeah. So that's definitely putting, you know, the usual pressure on the cost per student. And it's definitely a factor that we're obviously, you know, working into the plan. We have the supervisory union board meeting tomorrow night. I'm working on that budget. And I hope Friday we'll be able to look at a first draft of the SD budget internally to get a sense of, you know, what the initial draft cost per student looks like with this yield number that's been shared as of today. And of course, this is all in preparation for having a draft for the board on the 16th.
Right. I think I'm not sure that this may not even be necessary to say, but there's always there are always a lot of unknowns in this process, and we can get as far as July and still not know. And we're going to have a new legislature, very new conditions, and we also are going to have we have some new costs. We don't have enough tech support. We know our staff's going to have to be have a lot more professional development around remote learning. And I think everybody's going to need social, emotional, and mental wellness support. And those things are all going to cost money. And I think it's really important that we have a budget that, because we always do, we have a budget coming from our professionals that is going to do what needs to be done in the district. And then we'll look at the numbers and we'll, talk with the community and see what we may or may not have to do. But we need to, I want to just be sure and assure everyone that we're going to start with the budget that we need and do everything we can to get it passed and get those resources into the school and to our staff. So there's just a lot of unknowns, and everything affects everything else.
Yeah, it sure does.
Yep. We have a question from Liz. If you want, do you want to take that? Is that related, Liz, to?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Last year at the legislature, they expressed interest in backfilling pots of money, like the sales and use tax and stuff that goes into the ed fund, and thinking along the lines of backfilling pots, and then a bit down the road, over a period of years, paying that back. So I'm going to be in contact with Becca, because I think that's really important that was brought up last year, recognizing that COVID was going to, was going to damage funding to the ed fund from the various sources. So things may well change as we get into January and we hear more of what their thoughts are, but they didn't want the ed fund to take a big hit, like what this is suggesting.
Right. Thanks, Liz.
The other section I wanted to just summarize from our finance committee is capital project planning update, and really specifically progress on the academy project. So shall I jump into that, David?
Yeah, that would be great. We're gonna need a lot of detail on that at some point before we're done with this process. So yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, if you wouldn't mind allowing me to share screen.
I think it's already, yep, you can.
Okay, I will. I hope I can find my tab up here. Oh yes, here it is. Okay, so today I got an update from Nadev and Corey Fashi, Nadev from Building Green, Corey from Stevens Associates, along with Diane, the architect that you've seen as part of their presentation. What I wanted to bring you up to date on, I'll kind of summarize and we can get into as much detail as you like, but our objective, knowing, primarily driven by student need, is to occupy this new space in January of 22. In general, this project is estimated to take 6 months to construct and 6 months to design. And so you can see that puts us about a year and a month or so away from that goal if we wanted to occupy the spaces and serve our students, as intended and articulated. The need continues to grow, growing concern about the temporary building that is not meeting needs well. So, from Kelly's point of view, definitely a sense of urgency about moving ahead. This timeline is basically what we had contemplated back in April when the board approved the goals for the project, the sustainability and energy goals. But as we all know, the pandemic sort of really interrupted our progress and our focus, just because so many other things came at us, and we weren't actually able to get into buildings and do a lot of the work that needed to be done. So a quick overview of a general timeline. Here we are today, giving the board an update on the intent to move forward, and what that means is engaging Stevens and Associates along with Nadev, Building Green, and those energy consultants in beginning the final design, or another way to say it is refining the schematic design that you've seen as part of the feasibility study. And concurrently with that work, Nadev is coordinating some workshops, and let me read a little paragraph of what Nadev shared with me, specifically to help the board understand the next steps, and an invitation for the board to participate at to whatever level you would like. So, so in response to the board's decision to prioritize sustainability on the Academy School project, Stevens and Associates engaged Nadev Malin of Building Green as a sustainability consultant and facilitator. After the COVID delay, the team got in gear in September, brought on an energy consultant, Morgan Casella of Dynamic Organics in Putney, and a daylighting consultant, Donna Laban of Light Space Design out of Burlington. The team reviewed the current plans developed as a draft set of energy and sustainability goals to guide the design process. The goals address the energy use, the comfort, health, materials, the water, local ecology, and pedagogical opportunities. So next steps are they're kicking off a schematic design phase with workshops, at which they'll review and refine the goals. They'll explore the design solutions and technologies to help achieve them, and they would appreciate school board involvement in the workshop. We hope that one or more of board members could join the group, and the workshop will be a 3 to 4 hour long Zoom session, and Nadev is looking to find a time in the next few weeks to schedule that. He's referring to one workshop here in the memo. I see in this document I'm sharing with you, there's a reference to a couple of workshops. So as we go beyond, January, we really need to make a decision on the funding format. David, I know you've asked questions about what, do we have the option to fund it internally as opposed to a bond? And I believe we do have that option, so I can work through those two scenarios, over the next couple of meetings as we get closer to the point where we need to make a decision. And this is keeping in mind, in order to get a construction bid package, we need about 60% of the design work completed. And that's a significant cost. And generally you have a fairly complete design in order to inform the public on a reasonably accurate estimate of the cost if you're going for a bond vote. Okay, so the purpose of the discussion at the Finance Committee was to say there's a few significant decisions in front of the board coming up. We are on track for implementing the decision of the board back in April. But we really got to stay on track if we're going to be able to conduct a bid process in April and May, and then award the bid in June, and then start construction in July. So that's the gist of the of the discussion, and this document is on the Finance Committee website if you wish to review it.
Thank you, Frank. Do you have a number? You said it's expensive. The design process is expensive. Do you have a number for how expensive it is?
Some round numbers would be,
Yeah, that's great.
let's say the project was 2 million, which it could be certainly plus or minus of that. But given that we added the windows into the project, I don't remember if you remember. Yes. The feasibility study was basically 1.4 million, but then we said, geez, we've got, I think it's 18 classrooms with these really bad energy inefficient, don't open up kind of windows that need to be replaced. The sills are rotting. So it makes a lot of sense, especially from the board's point of view around sustainability and energy, that we address that now. So let's just say 2 million as a arbitrary number. Kind of a standard design cost is about 11%. So 11% of 2 million is a couple $100,000, a little more, 220,000, right? I get that right? Yeah. It's getting late, so I had to double think that.
You can go home in a couple of minutes.
Yeah, good. But I don't want to associate sustainability and energy efficiency with a higher cost that doesn't have a return. But the point is that we've had this conversation today, and it will be higher than that. The design cost will be higher than that. And it's not just design, but it's getting us through the permitting, it's getting us to a bid package, and it's some oversight of the project construction. So we discussed possibly as much as a 15% of the project cost, knowing that the sustainability goals that the board is asked for will have a long-term payback, right? With lower energy costs and a healthier environment. And those are things that will be identified in the workshops and discussed. So that's a hypothetical and a sort of a general outline, David, but it's probably in the ballpark.
Great, thank you. And are you planning on, are you thinking that we'll have a separate vote to approve using reserve funds once we know what the costs are going to be, if we choose to go that way?
If we go through the internal funding, it would definitely be part of the budget planning process with the board approval of that aspect of the budget. Yeah.
So we would try to have that on the ballot for March?
We could have it on the ballot for March. It would make sense if we wanted to move forward with a bid event. We need to have voter approval that we know we have the money. So March would make sense to either vote it as part of the general fund budget or have a bond vote on March 2nd, which is required to be Australian ballot.
Right.
So either scenario should happen. I would recommend we shoot for March, sometime in March, whether it's town meeting day or soon after.
And I don't want to belabor this because I know we're going to talk a lot about it. I just want to I'm a little fuzzy on the process. Can we just move the money from reserve into the general fund for a construction project, or do we need to get voter approval specifically to move? Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, I got it.
You may
remember the process.
Yeah, just as a quick aside, just so you know, there was a citizen that raised that question at one of our public annual meetings. And I made sure I went back to the statute and the VSBA legal counsel, and they gave me the statute. So yeah, it's once the reserve is in the capital improvement account, it is under the board's discretion to spend it, and it does not require a second voter approval.
Yeah. Great. Thank you.
Sure.
Any questions from the board about this? We haven't talked about this for quite a few months. I'm gonna, right after, well, maybe not right after the meeting, but I'm gonna go back and look at the notes that we had when we approved the goals, because I think there were some steps in there that may or may not be in here, and we're gonna obviously get updates on this before we make any really huge commitment. But I think we're going to need to talk about this. If it's going to be in this budget, we'll need to talk about this at maybe, I don't know if at the next meeting, or we might even need a separate just budget committee meeting, or just budget discussion meeting for this and a few other things that are out of the normal operating budget. Anyway, we're not making any motions or doing anything today. Just we're looking at this and going along with the schedule and starting the finalizing the design.
That's right.
So if we finalize the design, does that mean if we don't stop it by, if we decide we have some questions, and again, I said I haven't reviewed this since whenever that last meeting was.
Yeah.
I really have no idea what we were expecting or what we agreed to. So, but are we committing ourselves to spending in excess of $220,000 if we go ahead with this design schedule?
We're starting that process, but we're not going to, you won't spend that money.
We won't have a contract saying that we're going to give 15% of the cost to the designers.
No, I have asked Stevens Associates to update the last proposal they gave us, which we approved. It was part of that April discussion with the board. That was about 28,000.
Yeah.
And I've asked them to give us essentially a phased proposal so that you do know what you're committing to as we progress.
Yeah, great. Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Well, it's great to see this, to have this, it just went away, so it's really nice to see it's there and people are starting to breathe and think about the future. So questions from the board. Please remember to raise your blue hand. Sean, question or comment?
I think my question has been answered, and that is the agreement to move forward, formal authorization on December 11th. Does that refer back to the April agreement? And or do you need an agreement today?
I know that Nadev and Corey will be very eager to present to the board sort of more details, answer your questions. I think they may even be available for the next board meeting. So that actually would be good to establish now if you think that's appropriate, to just make an agenda item so we can plan for that. And Sean, I think that would be preferable because what we're operating under right now is the April 2020, board approval of proceeding to prepare for a bond vote. And that's where we outlined what has to happen if we're gonna ask the voters to approve a bond, or if we're gonna incorporate this project into the general fund, as we just said. Under either scenario, we need to be able to articulate a reasonable estimate of the cost of the project, and then obviously seek voter approval. And that either comes through the approved budget of the general fund, or it comes through a bond vote. And probably as soon as the next meeting, I would expect we would have the phased cost incurred on our way to that goal.
Frank, I don't want to, this is obviously, it's a really busy time and a busy season. I don't want to push too much on people, but I wonder if maybe next Wednesday, we should schedule a meeting. The PPC meets from 5:30 to 6:30, but maybe schedule a 6:30 meeting with them and get some of that background late. Answer some of those questions and get some of that clarified, because it would be nice to stick with this schedule, but it's just, the gap of time is leaving me a little bit nervous in terms of, due diligence in terms of the board's responsibilities.
Yeah, I could.
Maybe too much of a rush.
I could ask if they are available. And are you thinking a full board meeting or like a finance committee meeting?
No, I think the full board needs to vote on this ultimately. So I think we all need as much information as we can get.
Yeah, I can inquire if they are available. Were you thinking earlier in the day?
Well, earlier would work for me, but I'm not sure about others. The other thing we can do, this is a hard way to do it on a Zoom. Another thing we could do is certainly record it so it's available for people to see. But I was thinking later, but earlier would work for me. But other people have things to do before 5:30, so I'm not sure who's available. But we can hear from people. Take a minute to hear from people to see if they are available. Or actually, maybe wait to hear from Stevens and colleagues, and maybe get some suggested times from them, and then see what works for the board instead of trying to do it now.
Okay.
Is there anyone on the board that just really knows that they can't do that or don't want to do that and want to just have it, make sure it's just put it into our regular agenda and do it at a regular meeting? I don't want to make a decision for people that aren't going to be able to makes people unable to participate.
I can do later, like 6:30, but I can't do before 5:30. David,
Later's better for me as well.
Yeah. So I think, Frank, you should look for some days when later works.
So 6 o'clock kind of thing? Is that,
or 6:30?
Okay. All right, I will update you, David, on their availability.
Okay.
And if it works out that it can't come together because of scheduling, do we want to assume that we will at a minimum have a update from them on the 16th?
Yeah, but we won't have a commitment on the 11th then.
Right.
But that won't necessarily hold things up, will it?
I don't think it will hold things up. And the reason why I say that is I think when you have a chance to review what we did back in April, it's really moving toward what you already approved.
Yeah, it sounds like it. It sounds like that process, leading up to the bid is exactly what we talked about. I just can't remember.
That's what the board approved. Yeah.
Great. Great. So we're on track.
I think so.
Great. Other questions from the board? Other thoughts? Okay. Other things from that, I have a couple of things I wanted to ask about the finance committee, Frank, but if you have other things you wanted to report on first, that would be great.
No, that was the main topics for the discussion today and what I had in mind.
Great. The other things that on this November 4th meeting, and then on this budget as well, the budget planning, special ed services plan, and the capital plan discussion. Those are things that that the whole board needs to, well, certainly the discussion of the long-term capital plan, because it changes every year. And obviously it's going to change again based on what we're talking about. And also the special ed services plan, although that's primarily under the SU, I think it'd be good, 4 of us will hear it at the SU meeting, but I think it's good for the other 4 to hear that, to get that information from you better than from us. And then the other was just the I'm not sure what the agenda topic about budget planning and what was in that the rest of the board should know. We have a very different model now because the finance committee doesn't go back to local boards and talk about what the finance committee is doing. It's just one board. And it seems for things that we really know that everybody needs to, particularly with a lot of new members, that people need the background information. I think it's redundant to do it twice. I would like, but we're going to have to, because I think unless you've done some of that with the budget planning process and the calendar, if that's already complete, I don't know, because I don't go to the finance committee meetings. But the capital plan, certainly we haven't had a conversation about that, or the special ed service plan, and those are both important parts of the budget that we need information about. So I'm not asking you to do that now, please, but to include that in the process of the budget work that we're going to be doing in the next few meetings.
Yeah, and that is typically, we get into, in my experience, not with this board, of course, because we haven't gone through the process, but with other boards, that there would always be a recap of the finance committee's discussion around budget planning in all aspects of it, whether it's personnel, whether it's the health insurance, whether it's capital plan. Always a recap would go from the finance committee to the full board, and often it would be the chair. But if the chair of the finance committee felt that there was need for more detail from the administration, whether it's Andy or myself, we always prepare to elaborate. But yeah, my experience is that being able to get into more detail at the committee level, as you probably find typical with the other committees that are active, is helpful. It gives the administration time to consider questions that may not have come up when you get into a lot of detail at a committee level. So I think it has been a productive process with prior boards having a finance committee, but I agree with you. It's essential that the finance committee discussion and any consensus gets shared, and it's always on a recommendation to the board from the committee, as opposed to any sort of decision or action, unless occasionally there's a reason to delegate decision capacity to a committee. I think maybe that's done in the personnel committee or from time to time. But yeah, I agree that a summary of the work of the committee always needs to be shared with the board.
Thank you. Any comments, thoughts from the board? Quiet night. I know you're here because I can see you. I see you on the participants list. Sean, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just like to say that Wendy now takes all the minutes for the finance committee, and she does an excellent job. So I think that would be a good resource after finance committee. Unfortunately, I dropped the ball on the November 11th minutes, but it wasn't Wendy's fault. It was my fault, and they're on the website now. So I think that's a really good place to go back and see what did take place in the finance meeting. So that's all.
Thank you. Jackie?
Hi, so tonight was the first Finance Committee meeting that I attended. I finally attended one, but I would hate to not be able to continue to do that because it was a really nice setting with a small group and able to get a lot of information and ask a lot of questions in a smaller group. So I just wanted to mention that. I hope that we're able to continue doing that as a small group, not to have, you know, specific decision-making power, but to disseminate some of the information. I found it really helpful and appreciated, you know, a lot of time, a lot of Frank's time during that meeting. So thank you.
That's really helpful. Thanks, Jackie, because the like purpose in wanting it to come to the whole board is because I want everybody to be able to get all that information, but that may not be realistic, and we'll continue to explore that. Any other questions or thoughts around what Frank has presented so far? Seeing none, I did have a couple of questions or a couple of requests for specific budget information that people wanted to get. Where is it? Yeah. Well, let me just ask, I've got a couple of things here, but let me just ask, are there any things that people would specifically like to hear about in the budget report? We've talked about how the savings, the things I'd like to see are savings from the wood heat projects and the wood chip and the pellet projects, and also the electrical, the cost for electricity over the last several years since we've had been involved in the net metering system. That's provided an incredible amount of savings across the waste district, the 18 or 19 towns of the waste district. I think it's somewhere around $500,000 altogether that's been saved. And so it'd be really nice to see some numbers around that to reinforce the work that we have been doing around energy. And Tim, I'm forgetting, you had asked for something specific and I can't remember what it was. I wrote it down, but I can't find the piece of paper.
I can't recall, David.
Oh, great.
But as long as you call me, one thing I'm interested in is in the capital budget, how things are prioritized. For example, I remember visiting Guilford School. They have the same windows that Academy has, leaky roof and all that. So how were things prioritized in the capital budget? I know this happened long before I joined the board.
Yeah, generally it's based on the installation date of the major systems and then the expected useful life of those systems. So as long as I've been helping to facilitate the capital planning, I've tried to document going back 20 years, sometimes 50 years, you know, the origin of a certain asset. And then like for a roof, you know, if it was installed in the year 2000 and it's got a 20-year warranty, you know, it would have been on a capital plan schedule in the year 2020. So we do that for all the major, you know, mechanical systems, building structures, the electrical systems, plumbing, you know, the major investments that all facilities have to make over time. So that's generally how things get prioritized. When it gets to things like original construction characteristics of a building, like you mentioned, Guilford and/or Academy, and that's where, you know, those glass block windows they put in the 1970s, and sometimes they put them in the 1950s, that are known to be terrible heat loss, you know, building materials. Those we generally prioritize through what's been completed a couple of years ago, energy audits that identify the you know, the best payback scenario. And then of course, if the learning environment is really interfered with because of a something like you know, poor lighting, then, you know, we always address that regardless of the useful life. If it's just, you know, interfering with learning, it's a very high priority.
Thank you, Frank. I look forward to seeing the capital plan in detail.
Sure. And it is on the website. You can see.
Yeah, I'll just go there and look at it.
Yeah, and you can see the origin date in the more detailed document, the 17-page document. There's a summary document. You only see the aggregate of all of the site improvements, but the detailed document, you'll see the installation date on most of those major capital items.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
Sean?
I just like to say one more thing about being on the finance committee. One of the things that I always do is go through all the warrants and payrolls, and it's amazing. It's like being able to look through a window to see expenditures of money. It's a little bit tedious, but if you sort of get into a rhythm of how to look at the warrants, and I make notes when I do it. It's actually quite educational. And I think that the same thing would be true of the capital plan. Capital plan are posted, and they're very clear. You can see where expenditures are going to be made over a 6-7 year period. And so I think it's that involvement by all board members can be really, really good. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to point out I have pretty much developed the same process, but I know the budget looks very different the first or second or third time you look at it compared to the 15th or 20th. So it's a lot. We have a lot of experience. It's a lot easy. It's easy to see those things. But let's see. So Frank, anything else? Fiscal report?
That's all I had.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
So next are committee reports. Let's start with the leadership councils. Let's see. Putney and Dummerston meet on the 3rd. I think BAMS and Guilford, are they the only ones we've had? Sean, you want to go ahead?
Sure. The Guilford Leadership Council had its evening meeting on November 19th. And it was very well attended. There were 17 people in attendance. And there was a brief school board report and then the administrative report. And John went into quite a bit of detail about, all the things that are taking place in terms of remote and hybrid and all that type of things. And then there was talk about special plans that Guilford has for a parade that'll be coming up here pretty soon. And John talked about enrollment stability in Guilford, outdoor learning, the 3 outdoor learning spaces that are now employed at Guilford, the farm to school. John had very specific ideas about things that he wanted to make sure were included in the Guilford budget. And so I think that's been taken up with the business office. And so, yeah, it was a good meeting, and it was really nice to have, more people there at a time that is more convenient for some people, 6:30 as opposed to 1 o'clock in the afternoon on Fridays. So, thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Ruby? Putney meets tomorrow, but I think you had one in between.
We did. We have 2 a month now. We had a meeting and I sent a board report on November the 16th. And we were continuing to do work related to kind of just intention and process, but we're getting really honing in on how to organize our work, which is great. We do have a social media presence. So we have I can't remember if I told you guys this the last time you met. We have a Facebook page that is helpful for us in terms of posting events and pushing out information. We have lots of ideas or thoughts around family engagement, how to engage remote kids and in-person kids and connect cohorts that don't really see each other in person. Our first kind of focus is with the art teacher, and we have we just posted it to our Facebook page today. an art project that will hopefully kind of bring together all the art that all of these different cohorts are doing and put them into quilts by class. And that can be something that kids can share with each other. And that will probably be the first of a few different art projects that hopefully will help to kind of congeal our community. And then the biggest thing at the last meeting was that it was, we had a discussion group. We invited the community, both the PCS community and the greater Putney community, to kind of come together and talk about social justice and racial equity for our kids and in our school. We did have a few new faces. Also, Mike Merwicki, who's a Putney resident, was there as well. So it was a really great conversation, but small. And that was meant to be really the first of a number of them. And so today actually was the Social Justice Committee of PCS, which is a staff committee. They meet, I think, monthly or maybe every 2 weeks. And Jamie Contois, who's on the Leadership Council, and I attended that, the first 30 minutes of that meeting. It was a pretty small meeting just because of the, some logistics around their committee. But the idea is that every month that they will create a space that will allow for some community and parent engagement around social justice. And so hopefully the Leadership Council will find a way to promote that and get the word out. So we're trying to find ways to connect our parents and our community to that social justice work that's happening at the staff level. That's it. And then we do meet tomorrow.
Great. Thanks, Ruby. The board member or Keith from BAMS, I believe you folks had a meeting. Okay.
Sure.
Thanks.
Yeah, sorry,
It's okay.
I had the camera on here. Yeah, we had a meeting. Just briefly, we're starting to get a good base, small group. There were nine folks there. Liz Adams joined us, and that was great to see her, and a couple of teachers, and then parents. And I gave an update. We're looking at a lot of potential changes for second semester based on kind of survey results that will be coming out. So I just gave an overview that there's a lot of work happening behind the scenes to try to figure out how we move forward, depending on how many kids are considering staying remote versus coming hybrid. And so I gave some of those updates. I have an administrative intern who is working to essentially create annual goals and to create it's based on the word for it, essentially a sorry.
Okay, long day.
Kind of creating
I'm surprised you guys.
goals.
You
Yes,
people can even
it's been a
talk.
very long day. But basically creating goals for the year. And so she's been working on that. And so we talked and we heard from parents around what they would like and shared some ideas around that. Shared ideas to get, like we talked about, connecting with Beth Bristol at Guilford. And some parents had some great ideas and ways to continue to develop connections. And that was the bulk of the meeting. But we're feeling pretty good about the direction we're going.
Great. Thank you, Keith. And are there any leadership councils that met that didn't make it onto our calendar? So I don't know you met. Okay, good. Let's see, the Diversity Equity Committee, I don't believe met. The Finance Committee we heard from. Personnel Committee had a meeting.
Yeah,
Kelly?
we just. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so we met, oh, it's hard to think, was it yesterday or 2 days ago? It was recently. And we approved some 1% requests from the middle school. There were some other requests that we, did, review.
We're losing you a little bit.
Can you still hear me?
It's very low volume.
Okay, hold on. Sorry about, am I better?
A little bit.
Okay, so we did 1% requests, and most of them were from the middle school. We approved them pending confirmation from Keith that the work had been completed, because a number of the requests were from over the summer, etc., and so some of them may have been stale and may not have been able to be completed.
Great, thank you. And are there any other committees that met that I didn't find on the calendar? Okay, and Michelle, are you, have you been hearing from people? You sent out, did you send out the survey, either the website survey or the, or any of those from the Communications Council during this week?
We didn't send it out, but it's
Okay.
ready to go. We just need
Great.
to figure out the best way to distribute it and write a little note so people know
Great.
what it is.
Great, thanks. Tim?
I might have missed it, but has the policy committee set a date for the meeting where they'll talk about the climate emergency task force's proposal?
Yes, we set a date and then we changed it. I was trying to find that the other day and so I could put together the Zoom and I couldn't find it. So
Monday, 7th, Dave.
and what is it, December 7th?
Yes, Monday,
Yeah, and
Oh.
what time? Is it 4:30?
4:30.
Thank you. I looked at the minutes, but all that had was what we decided at the meeting and I couldn't find the email.
So,
Yeah, so policy is December 7th, Monday at 4:30, and I'll send the Zoom out tomorrow.
okay.
If our
thanks.
fans got the agenda, we'll get it to Barb and get it out tomorrow.
I sent it to Barb today.
Oh, perfect. Then I'll hear from her tomorrow for the Zoom. Great, thank you.
Thanks. If I may,
Yes,
I
go
just
ahead.
want to congratulate Tom and his partner on their new baby.
Thank you. Yeah, Donovan, a baby boy for Tom and Ava. Another member of the board family. 2 babies this year. Carrie,
Thanks. Just an update and a reminder that we have an SU meeting tomorrow night at 6. And we'll be talking the special ed budget and food service, as well as I think doing the second reading of the policies you guys are doing tonight. And then we've got another one scheduled for next Thursday, December 10th, also at 6. And that's when we will take action on the SU budget. So heads up.
thank you. And speaking of the policy review, that brings us to unfinished business. Just to mention once again that policy D16, electronics communications between employees and students is available to be viewed on the WSESU or SD website. F37, district equity policy, and F38, prevention of sexual harassment as prohibited by Title IX are all available. This is the second notice. We will be voting at the next meeting to either approve or to ratify or not those policies. I mentioned earlier, in addition to unfinished business, and that's just a reminder for Kelly, for myself, for Tim, and Anne, whose terms are up this spring, whose board terms are up, that contact your town clerk about how to apply this year. The legislation has changed. You don't have to get a petition signed by a bunch of people, but you do have to get on the ballot. So contact the town clerk for information about how to go about that. And then the other thing, again, just to get feedback from people, you can either email me or speak up now if you want to. But if what you're thinking is about whether we should put an article on the warning to allow the towns the opportunity to vote to dissolve this board, unified board. All the towns voted against the merger. We were forced to merge. And I just want to find out if we haven't talked about this or looked into this. We haven't talked about the benefits or drawbacks of this board. We're operating in a very different situation. I have not heard a lot of conversation about this or a lot of concerns about this in the community or in my personal circles. But I don't want to let the election season go by without bringing it up and having people think about it and think about whether it's something we want to put in front of put to the towns. We don't have to do this. It's not really our responsibility at all. If there are people in the community who want to dissolve the board, or want to go back to the local boards, they have the option of getting a petition signed and submitting it. And there may actually be a shorter process given the pandemic. I haven't looked into that statute, but there are options for people that really want to do it. And for others who want to see how this goes, there's not a big rush. The legislature might change the law and make it hard because this wasn't part of what they planned, that people could get a divorce, that districts could get a divorce, but the law allows it. So I just want people to think about it and consider it and see if they think we should take any action and talk about it or not even talk about it. So please contact me or say right now that you want to or don't want to talk about it. Kelly?
Well, I want to say, David, thank you for bringing that up because it's certainly an interesting thought. I think as we've been going along and we've been doing the work of the board and doing what's needed for the district, I think that's kind of the ideas kind of fallen by the wayside, and maybe people haven't realized that it is still, that it could still possibly happen. Maybe it could or maybe it couldn't, I don't know. But I think it would be certainly interesting to kind of get a feel for what the community is, how satisfied they are with how things are going, or are they happy with? Maybe the community is surprised that this is turned out better than they expected, or maybe it's turned out worse than they expected, and maybe they want to go back to the smaller school boards. And I think just as a sort of preliminary thought, it seems like a really good idea to at least get some feedback from the communities. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you. That's a really good idea. If we've got a lot on the agenda or on the warning and passing that along and skipping that and actually just doing some community outreach and getting some information from people and getting some feedback on our performance from the community, I think is a really good idea anyway. So I think, thanks, Kelly. I think we'll put that on the agenda and make sure we get to it. I got to write it down so I don't forget. Any other thoughts? Hearing none. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak on topics not on our agenda? I am not seeing any hands. I can only see 6 people and they're not waving. So I don't think we have any of that. So Ann Beekman, would you take us out?
Mr. Chairman, there being no further business before this board, I move that we adjourn.
They have a second.
We didn't do the, did we vote on the resolution?
Yeah, we did that first in the meeting.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay.
I'll second Ann.
Yep. Barb put it on the agenda twice so that I wouldn't forget it.
Okay.
So it's moved and seconded. Any discussion? I don't even know if you can. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Well, thank you, folks. We got out in a little over an hour and a half. Good work.
Wow.
Don't expect it again for a while. When we get into the meat of the budget, we'll be here for a while. Thank you. Good night.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, everybody.